Welcome to the Rubin Museum online and this special Brainwave session in our annual series in which we explore the workings of our mind through Western contemporary psychology and neuroscience in the context of Buddhist and Indic philosophy and practice. I'm Tim McHenry. For those of you in the vicinity of New York, yes, the museum is open, but just the galleries and the shop at this point. But we're very happy to be able to bring our programming to you online wherever you are in the world. Our theme this year is awareness, inspired by the current exhibition, Awaken, which is a visual guide to enlightenment using the construct of a mandala. Now, you might well ask what chess has got to do with awareness in a Buddhist or Indic context. Well, Buddhists are instructed to live in the now. And a chess master absolutely has to live in the now of the game without distraction. His or her attention to the opportunity at hand has to be supreme. But at the same time, the chess player is drawing upon volumes of memorized experiences to inform the future of the game. And it is this ability to inhabit past, present, and future in coherent balance that might very well be the now that we keep hearing about. Today, we have the great privilege of hearing directly from the experience of one of the world's most accomplished chess masters, Viswanathan Anand, about how his mind works during a game of chess. And well before the Queen's Gambit, thanks to Vishy, this ancient Indian board game has become pretty much a mass sport in India. Now, helping us explore the mind of this five-time world champion is Dr. Murali Doraiswamy. Happily, he's no stranger to the Rubin, but his full-time job is as professor and neuroscientist at Duke University School of Medicine, where he directs a leading research program for reversing age-related brain disorders, which includes co-leading a large clinical trial examining the benefits of computerized cognitive training for preventing Alzheimer's disease. And Murali is also the co-author of a popular book, The Alzheimer's Action Plan. Okay then, start your clock. On your marks, get set, go for Vishy Anand and Murali Doraiswamy on The Brain's Gambit.
Thank you, Tim. It's such a pleasure and honor to be here with Vishy at this Brainwaves forum. Hi, Vishy. Haven't seen you in person for a long time, but it's such a pleasure to see you again.
Great to see you again, Murali. How are you?
Great, thank you. And for all of those joining from India, our hearts and prayers, and we wish you all good health and hope the pandemic resolves soon. So there are three areas that I want to cover today. The first is how do chess grandmasters think and how do they make decisions? The second is how do they train? And the third is what are some of the broader insights that all of us ordinary mortals can gain from a mind master in our daily life and possibly even to prevent diseases like ADHD and Alzheimer's disease. So the first question, Vishy, that I want to ask you is, the title, The Brain's Gambit. I assume you've seen The Queen's Gambit?
Yes, I have. It is a very well produced show. I would say the book is excellent. It's for the few who maybe haven't seen it yet. It's set about this orphan girl who grows up in an orphanage. It's set in the 50s, maybe early 60s in the US. So clearly, for me, that immediately rings my Bobby Fischer bell, and you start thinking about him. But it does deviate from Bobby's life. So there's a bit of the challenges that a chess player goes through, the sense of achievement you have, the tournament scene and all has been well researched. So they capture all that very well. I found it very recognizable. I could remember my school tournaments and my first foreign junior tournaments that I played in.
You know, one way the Queen's Gambit obviously differs from Bobby Fischer is the protagonist is a woman. And
Yes.
there are not that many chess grandmasters who are women. I think it's a relatively small percentage, maybe 20% or so. Is there an increasing number of women taking to chess?
Yes, it is going up, but from a very, as you noted, it starts from a very low base. So even the furious progress, there's still a huge gap. And I think in the top 100, there's still only one woman. And the reason for this gap is a little bit mysterious. My first hunch would be that simply boys find it easier to learn because the social circle is bigger. They, in a chess tournament, the majority of players are boys. They're able to interact and exchange ideas, and girls don't. So in the sense, during the computer revolution, where information started becoming available and accessible through computers and telecommunications, girls narrowed the gap a lot. And my hunch is it's essentially a participation gap, but it does remain to be explained.
So let's get to the meat of the question, which is, how does Viswanathan think? So, perception and awareness is the theme here. And we know almost every major advance in sort of human life, if you will, has occurred because of people who thought differently, who saw things differently. And perception is so crucial for human survival all along, for food, for how we see family, how we see enemies versus friends, so on and so forth. So how does an expert chess player like yourself see the chess set? How do you make decisions? How far ahead do you think?
Well, Capablanca once, the Cuban world champion from the 1920s, he once famously said, "I see only one move ahead, but it's the best one." And of course, he meant it as a joke, but there's a grain of truth in it. A chess player sees what is necessary for him to see to make his move. So let's start there. The next stage is, well, when do you know that you're ready to make a move? And that you can call intuition, you can call bias, you can call the sum of your experience, and so on. But essentially, there comes a point when you have to make a snap judgment. My own experience, and most of the players I know, what you're better at, you judge better and faster. What you are not familiar with, you make far more mistakes, you miss obvious things, and it takes you longer to orient yourself. And so chess, literally, the kinds of positions you've studied all your life, they come to you very fast. The new material, and now there's a lot of new material coming into chess because of computers. So many new patterns and ideas that break our old way of doing things, the old rules we used to live by. And so there's a process by which you try to catch up, you try to sit there and essentially become familiar. And in the end, it's maybe like a city. The city you lived in for 10 years, inside out. You somehow can guess where the next thing might be. Even intuitively, you'll have a sense of where to go. In a totally new city with an alien language, you might hesitate to step out of your hotel. It's not too different from a chess player. But as with all things, the more time you spend with it, the better you get. And so essentially, it's pattern recognition, and it takes time. But once it happens, it happens.
So, you mentioned it's a combination of intuition and knowledge. There are two classic styles of thinking, which is thinking fast, intuitively, and thinking slow, which is sort of taking deep, deliberative thinking. Now, you are, I believe, 50 or 51, and there was a classic paper that just came out showing that chess players' optimal skills peak between their 30s and 40s. And first of all, I don't know if you agree with that. And two, if you do agree with that, we know from cognitive neuroscience that attention, reaction time, speed of processing, all of those start to decline a little bit past the age of 40. Are you seeing any changes? Have you changed the way you sort of play, the combination of intuition versus knowledge, expertise versus speed? Are there any compensatory changes you've made over the years?
Okay, so there's a big revolution. When I was young, I grew up with this explanation, if you like, that older players were more experienced, they were smarter, they knew their way around. Smarter in the sense that they knew where to look for something, they knew what would be good. They had more, quote unquote, wisdom, but youngsters were better in calculation. That is the actual thing of, I go there, he does that, I do this, he does that, I do this, he does that, and keeping track of that position. Youngsters are better. As you get older, you're supposed to be making more and more mistakes. And these forces were once in some sort of balance, in the sense that an older player could approach the game intelligently. He could study the games of his younger opponent and decide what kind of a position am I aiming for, which plays to my strengths, and how do I take it there. Whereas a youngster compensated with raw calculating ability and energy and youth. When I was in my teens, the average age of the top 10 in the world was in the 30s, something like 34 or 35, which I checked once. Now it is in its low 20s. I think the average age is 22 or something like that. And that includes a couple of outliers like me, 50-year-olds. So, you remove us and so it is getting harder. But what has tipped the balance is computers. So computers now, because they're so superior to everything the human does, and by the way, they've incidentally proven the point that calculation is far more important than strategy and intuition and long-term thinking.
That's right.
Essentially, all that is guessing. A computer will beat a human 1,000 times out of 1,000 because it does not make tactical mistakes. A chess game, in a sense, is decided by your bad moments, not by your good ones or brilliant ones. And once you've taken that into account, the quick answer is the youngsters take a lot less time to get a lot of experience, a lot of pattern recognition, because what once took them a lot of time, now they can plow through it faster with a computer and studying all the new material. But the older players are not able to balance that anymore. So right now, most of the current generation of players in their interviews, they just say, well, I expect to stop when I'm 40. My generation, probably when we entered chess, we had this notion that we should get into our 60s. So maybe that's why we've been a bit reluctant to go as well. But we have also adapted. We're like a transition generation. And the modern one has never known a world without a laptop.
That's a great endorsement of how much we have improved, because the same paper that I talked about which showed that the optimal age is between 30 to 40, they also reported that the optimal chess playing skills have dramatically improved over the last 25 years, probably because of the availability of computer software that you mentioned. Because in the old days, I don't know how people trained in the old days. How did they train? By reading books? Because nobody reads a chess book now, I'm assuming, right?
There's still some value in reading books, just like you have your ebooks and then you have normal books, and people still do that. But the pace of information, the thing is, even in a book, an author has to select what is the limited amount of information he gives you, and then you still have to go and if you want to look for more, you'll probably end up on a computer screen. A chessboard is nice if you want to move the pieces, and that comes to the closest to recreating your experience when you're actually going to play a tournament game. So that is vital, because without that, when you land at the board, it will feel unfamiliar. But the amount of work I can get done with a computer is 100 times faster than with a chessboard. To give you an idea, in 1995, when computers basically couldn't play chess at all, or very little, and you could use them for basic error checking, it would take my team maybe a week to be convinced that a position was good or bad. Now a computer can give you that answer in seconds. It used to be hours, and now it's just seconds. So you cannot avoid working with the most modern and capable tools. And then you have to slow down and think, well, what in that blizzard of information did I actually understand? What do I feel intuitively? And so very often with my trainers, after we did the work, I would sit at the chessboard with them, and they would give me random positions, and I would have to work and judge them, because that is the only thing that recreates a tournament scene. So yes, these developments are accelerating, and now, in fact, it's going even faster, because we thought about 4 or 5 years back, we thought that computerized techniques had hit their peak, and from now on, you could tweak a little bit, but there wouldn't be dramatic changes. And then AI chess playing stuff came out, and that started doing things in a totally different way. So again, chess development seems to have sped up.
Now you mentioned one point, which is people lose because of the mistakes and the bad moves they make. I'm assuming some of it is due to anxiety. And are there strategies that you have to stay calm? And because I think our perception is influenced by our emotions, maybe the psychology of the opponent, the type of opponent you're playing. There are a variety of factors that influence our awareness, I'm assuming. So I don't know how you see it. Does it matter which opponent you play or the situation?
Very much. In fact, it is the most important thing. Generally, very quickly, you will sense this, and most players have said this as well, that you don't play the board, you play your opponent. You're not trying to play a perfect game of chess. You are trying to outplay an opponent. And you may say, well, but what's the difference? If you make the best moves, aren't you going to outplay someone? And the thing is, that is very, very subjective. What is the best move on the board may be something I can live with, because the kind of problems it poses, I'm happy solving. But if you give me a move that is objectively inferior, but doesn't play to my strengths, I mean, the kind of problem solving that happens there, I'm uncomfortable with, or I'm uncomfortable with at the board with reduced time, or I'm uncomfortable when the stakes are high, and all those things, once they feed in, then choosing the right gamble or risk even against the right opponent becomes a crucial element. More to the point, staying calm is one of the most important things you can do. As I said, chess is it's not about brilliant moves, it's about avoiding mistakes. And to the extent that you're able to stay calm, you increase the odds of making fewer mistakes. I would say the most important thing for chess is still to have a good night's sleep the night before. But it isn't just about sleeping. When I go to sleep, I am putting the previous day's game behind me. Whether the result was favorable or unfavorable or neutral, I'm putting that result behind me. And I'm trying to concentrate, peak concentrate on the next game, the game that will happen tomorrow. And this is vital, because there are moments when some games you can become euphoric because of an unexpected success, or you can hate yourself because you blew a simple chance and in a way that you have trained not to do, and all that stuff can work through your head. And if you carry that over, it'll impact your performance the next day.
Are there specific rituals or techniques you have to forget a good or a bad experience? To put that out?
Yes, in fact, so to complete the thing, that happens within a single game as well. So if the start of the game was very favorable and I got excited and then I spoiled it and came down and so on, you arrive at a point where you should only be thinking of the board in front of you, but you still, you're not reached this. I found that it's very helpful to either sit on my hands for 5 minutes, or to get up and go to the players' lounge and have a coffee or something and just wait for 4 or 5 minutes. And somehow when you come back to the board, you've accepted what has happened that day, and you're no longer berating yourself for it. And then what happens is you're able to start thinking, well, here is what I have now. Let me do the best I can now. And this is a very useful skill. I mean, there are people who could do this, I think, easier than others. And you could see that it made a difference, especially in the tense games where inevitably mistakes will be exchanged. But there are rituals as well. For me, this getting up and leaving is one important thing. Being able to take a few deep breaths. Between games, go for a nice walk, just to clear your head. And for me, during tournaments, I would go to the gym just before dinner. So I'd do something intense, be really tired, have dinner, and then I'd be so tired, I'd just fall asleep. And that meant that at least till 3 and 4 in the morning, I would not have the energy to worry, which means all that time, my body has actually gotten some rest. You train for it psychologically. You look at your past tournaments and what is the moment at which I totally lost control? Why did it happen? Did I hate my opponent's face? I mean, it's not like you do this on paper, but you play over it all the time in your head. And inevitably you're thinking, well, the next time this happens to me, if I remember, and that's the key thing, because at the board, your emotions are not letting you think. But if I were able to stop myself, this is what I should do. And then you need little cues. You need little cues when that tell you, this is what I should do in this situation. So I know that when I hit move 40, I get up and go to the lounge, like I mentioned. I know that when I have 2 minutes and I have 3 moves to make, I should not act like I have 2 seconds. I should maybe let 30 seconds pass because I still have enough time to complete the game. And if you remember it to the extent that your training also comes into this, if you remember that, then you're able to apply it.
No, that's brilliant advice. It applies not just to chess, but everything in life, right? We send out hot-headed emails all the time. So everything you're saying makes sense, because in neuroscience, we call two different types of cognition, hot cognition and cold cognition. Hot cognition is when you're emotional and you're making sort of impulsive decisions. And it's sort of what we call bottom-up processing. It comes from the limbic system, which is sort of the seat of some of our angers and emotions. And whereas cold cognition, when you're calm, when you're detached a little bit, like you said, when you take a short walk, that is called cold cognition, which is top down. It comes from the frontal lobe, which, as many people know, is sort of the executive making sort of center. And I think EEG studies of chess players who are sort of in the flow have shown an increase in theta waves in the frontal lobe, which are sort of slow, almost meditative kind of states, suggesting that that's when you make the best decision. So that's terrific advice for all walks of life. So I want to show you a few visuals to jog your memory and see how good your memory is. But before I show you those visuals, I've seen some things in the literature saying expert grandmasters may remember 10,000 games or games over 25 years or whatever. What is the true extent of your memory? Have you tested yourself to see it? Or what would you guess? How many games are in your sort of repertoire, if you will, in your brain?
I don't have a number for sure. It must be in the thousands. It cannot be in the millions. That's too much. Though I may well scroll through fragments of millions of games.
Got it.
But you may not necessarily play through the whole game and so on. And what you remember are fragments. You remember stories. It's not dissimilar to, if you take the news from 5 years ago, what will you remember? You'll remember the highlights. You'll remember the stuff that made an impression on you, that left a trace in your memory. You'll remember special events because somebody did something unusual.
Right.
It's like that in chess. You remember the stuff that stands out. A lot of stuff, if there has no special meaning, you'll forget it. And in the 50s or 60s, there was this famous study about chess players.
Correct.
That they gave two groups of chess players, a strong grandmasters and club players, 10 positions. And the grandmasters outperformed like crazy. They remembered all these positions perfectly. They remembered who played them, what happened, and so on. The club players struggled. And it seemed that grandmasters just had photographic memory. But they also tried giving them nonsensical positions where the pieces did not make any sense. And of course, there the grandmaster level dropped. So grandmasters it was not photographic. They were not remembering positions. They were remembering stories.
And that describes all of human memory, not just chess, because it's a high fidelity recording of everything we do in our lives. Otherwise, our brains would go crazy. So I think it just sort of reconstructs memories when it needs it, as exactly as you said, based on bits and pieces of information. It's all associations. So, all right, are you ready for the challenge now? So let me show you visuals. Let's see, you remember this game? What do you remember about it?
Well, I remember that it's the puzzle that's given to us to show us the back rank. And basically what this means, if the white queen captures the black queen, then black delivers a checkmate on the back rank. So I remember this as being a game of Capablanca. I had to stretch myself a little bit. I could be wrong about the white player, but I remember it as Capablanca. And in this case, the white pawns and the black pawns on the king side are correct. I know this for sure. But in a different context, the white pawn on the extreme right or the one next to it could be one square ahead or back. If the detail doesn't matter, then I might not remember it, is what I'm trying to say. But I remember this game because of the back rank effect, and that's how I know the pawns are exactly where they have to be.
Wow, that's incredible. I think 15 years after our Zoom call today, I'm going to test your memory to see how much you remember of the Zoom call, to see if it's context dependent or not. Let me test your memory.
Well, this is a game I must have seen when I was 7 or 8 years old, so I remember it a lot longer.
So let's see, one more.
This is Larsen-Spassky from the USSR Rest of the World match. And in fact, there used to be a black knight on the G4 square, and that's how all this happened. once you've seen this game, you don't forget it, because it's actually a brilliant game. You can see that currently black has just sacrificed his rook, but white realizes he can't take it. And so his position falls apart, and it's lost in Spassky.
Wow. I'm going to show you something which is not a memory, but you'll recognize this because it's one of your games, and I think it's some people have called it the game of the century. Does this ring a bell? Can you tell us a little bit about this game?
Well, it's a funny story, because while we're talking of memory, I think this game also illustrates how precariously perched that skill is about memory. So essentially, this was a theoretical debate. This was a line that was thought to be good for white, but in my match preparation for a world championship in 2012, we had discovered that in fact it is good for black. My opponent, though, had not done the same work. My opponent is Levon Aronian. He had not done maybe the same amount of work, so he confronted me with a position he thought was good for white. I knew the contrary to be true, and we got here. The only thing is, I had done this work in April 2012, and this game was played in January 2013. By which time my mind had wandered in 100 different problems. And when I got here, I could no longer remember what I'm supposed to do next. I simply could not find a move which made sense, and I could not understand how such a position could be good for black. The only thing I remembered was that I have a good position. I knew that the computer had confirmed that this position is extremely good for black. And I thought 25 minutes here. And by the way, my trainer who was in the room then got worried. He thought, why is he thinking for 25 minutes in a game that was an important part of our match preparation? So what is he thinking about? Anyway, I had one more little detail. Somehow that black knight over here, I don't know if you can see my arrow, but the black knight in front of the queen ended up where the white bishop in front of white's queen is. And that is the only snippet of information that I remembered from all the analysis. And by the way, later on, the analysis would go into 10 or 12 pages if you printed it out. Wow. But the only fragment I read was that I remembered was that knight was actually 4 squares down that line. In fact, I played a game which many people have said was the game of the century. Given that there were 87 years left, I think that's a premature declaration, but certainly it's one of my best games and one of the games I'm most proud of. But it made a huge difference to my memory. Essentially, it's like finding yourself in a library without knowing that there's an important book there, or finding yourself in a library, remembering clearly there is an important book there. And it's a different search you do when you have that kind of recollection. So anyway, that was the point. Go on.
So I want to ask you one last question about your training. It could be chess, it could be bridge, it could be tennis, it could be anything. Tell me the routine of an athlete like you at a high level. How many hours do you train? How do you train? And how does the computer help you to train?
So I begin my day with a run or some physical training, maybe lift some weights, some weight training. This is important. I wasn't like this when I was very young, but in pre-computer times, physical fitness wasn't as relevant to chess players as now, because now we're being flooded with information in our heads. Chess seems to have taken on a physical aspect. If you're tired, you simply forget stuff because your brain is being flooded. And we have found that if you're unable to cope with the tension, the pressure of play and everything, without being physically fit. It's a little bit like golfers. I mean, once upon a time, they had probably a physically undemanding profession, but now they're also obsessed with fitness. So it could be similar. Then I start work around 11. If I have a group of people, we'll try to meet around that time. I mean, chess players still like to sleep late, so I think that's the only realistic thing. And we would then put in a couple of hours, break for lunch, go for a nice walk, come back, put in a couple of hours, then take another walk, maybe play something, go out, whatever. And so acts, stretches of intense chess study interspersed with breaks where you just walk, move around, get some fresh air, talk about other stuff, let your brain switch off and come back. And then you come back and work again, because clearly intense work for 5 or 6 hours is counterproductive. You need to keep breaking it into small, intense segments. And that's my routine. I can do this for 6 days a week, 2 to 3 months. If I'm training for something very important, I might have an extra break in between, but yeah, basic idea.
Got it. And
I'll do a less intense version for something which is not as, where the stakes are not that high. It's a balance as well. You want to work very hard, but you don't want to work so hard that you're sick of chess at the end. Yeah. So there is clearly, for a match, you would like as much work to be done before. So you err on the side of overdoing the work. For tournaments, you might actually err on the side of, let me just do a little bit of work and cope with problems as they happen. So it's balance.
So, in neuroscience, we have this saying, use it or lose it. That is, obviously you rehearse a lot and the brain undergoes neuroplastic changes, size of the various structures can increase, the efficiency of circuits can increase, but do your skills deteriorate if you don't practice? And how quickly do they deteriorate and how much do they deteriorate?
They deteriorate fast. You find that your execution gets more choppy, first of all. So you'll remember the big picture, but chess isn't about, chess is mainly about execution. It's mainly about tactics. If I execute a brilliant combination perfectly from move 53 to move 61, and then I blunder on move 62, it doesn't matter. I will lose the game. It's only about execution. And your execution gets worse because you get a bit sloppier. You don't pay attention to every resource of your opponent. You don't use your own resources most efficiently. So there's already a slide in performance on day one. If I refresh something today, then tomorrow I'll be almost perfect at it. And the more often I refresh my memory, the easier it gets. So your performance can go up and down in the same thing. It can go down for a while, you can seem to be getting worse, and then you put in 1 or 2 months work, you don't realize anything good is happening, and then suddenly you find that your performance is going up all the time. So you can come back just as easily as you can fall down. But it is quite dramatic if you're not working, and most chess players will, even if they're not working, they're following chess for 1 or 2 hours a day. Right. Which is like a bird's eye view of what other people are doing, because without that, you get out of date very fast.
Yeah, and that's exactly what studies have shown. For example, right now, the FDA in the US has approved a digital therapeutic, which is a computerized cognitive program for ADHD, for treating kids who have a deficit disorder. And as Tim mentioned in the introduction, we're doing a trial of computerized cognitive training for prevention of Alzheimer's. And we have built in periodic booster sessions to ensure that the skills don't deteriorate. So we go through an intense phase initially, and then we have periodic boosters to keep up those skills. So it's exactly the same as what you're saying. It applies to sort of other walks of life. So I think we just have a couple of questions before. I just have one question to you before we open up for sort of a general Q&A. Do you have some suggestions for just, broader lessons that everyone can take from chess? Should every school child play chess, for example? In Russia, I think at one point they were recommending that every child play chess, and there are studies suggesting that you can improve your memory, your school grades. What are your thoughts on, some just broader lessons that all of us can learn from chess and chess strategy?
I think for me, it's a no-brainer that learning how to play chess, learning how to solve problems and all, and in this competitive environment is very good brain training. In the same way that we no longer see the need to explain why it is very healthy for kids to go outside, fall on grass, kick a football, because it builds your coordination. Well, chess does that for the brain. Having said that, I would guess that maybe 3 hours a week or 4 hours a week is plenty, just like physical activity. I think if you want to be if you want to improve in academics, you can do maybe 2 or 3 hours a week of chess a week. If you want to be a good mathematician, do 10 hours of maths. You want to be a good chess player, do 10 hours of chess. So, that's my thing. So chess helps you with this kind of problem solving, decision making, but also it gives you a sense of how, depending on your brain's mood, your performance can vary so much.
Right.
And maybe that's a healthy lesson to take away as well. The other thing is you can work on, if there's something you don't know how to do, you can train yourself to work on it and come back and see if you can do it better. And this is a nice routine that chess establishes that I think then carries over to most areas. So yes, essentially what physical exercise is to school, I feel this is a good mental activity.
Well said. I have one question that I have to ask you, which is, you threw in something there that I didn't have time to focus on. You said computers now can beat even a grandmaster like you sort of effortlessly, and you said it's proven certain points. Where do you think we're headed as far as human brain versus machine brain? You think, Elon Musk says AI is going to take us all over, should we be thinking about working together? I know there's already an augmented chess tournament, which you've been taking part in, and people are already saying there's going to be no such thing as IQ. It's only going to be a human IQ plus machine IQ combined. Just what are your thoughts on that, the future?
Okay, well, around about the late 90s, computers started outperforming chess players consistently, but these were still very big and powerful machines. Then by the early 2000s, a good laptop could beat any human being. Then it's the latest phone. Now it's maybe a 4-year-old phone. Soon it'll be your fridge and your microwave. It's going in that direction. But so we are never going to compete against machines anymore, because that contest ceased to have any meaning. It's no matter how fast a human body runs, you're not going to test it against a car. And it's the same thing here. But they used to call it advanced chess, where basically the idea is a person could consult a computer, eliminate the arithmetic mistakes, the little details, and just get into the conceptual stuff. That worked for a while, but if you give both players a computer, the game can also be boring. So in a sporting context, it wasn't very interesting. That's not to say it's hopeless, but it had its limitations.
Got it.
More broadly speaking, I find that nowadays, because computers give you the answers to everything instantly, and a much better answer that you could have in chess. This is not the case outside of chess.
Yeah.
But in chess, a computer can give you a better answer that you could hope to have within seconds of you asking the question. But those answers contain a million little details. And if you're only getting the answer, but you don't have the million little explanations, you're not getting a full picture.
Got it.
And the biggest skill I have trained over the last few years, both consciously and subconsciously, is how to keep on nagging the computer with questions. How every time the computer gives you a line, you look for things that you still don't understand, and then you pose that back as a question and get an answer there, and then you think. And then you match up all the answers and you get a kind of pattern. And then it'll hit you why a position is good, because you have to keep probing till you get the why. You know what is good, but you don't know why it is good. And that combined with humans being able to understand what the problem is in the first place. Computers, they solve things, but they have no sense of why that is a problem or what they're trying to do with it. And that's really the thing. So in a sense, yes, it's a combination, but it allows us to build on a very capable tool, but knowing how to use it effectively, because in a sense, in the end, our brain is more powerful. It's able to do phenomenal stuff with that answer, but you have to work in the right way to get it. In the same way that cars and planes and ships expanded our reach everywhere, this will expand our reach. I'm not yet in the situation, though I'm a big fan of Terminator movies, I don't think that's actually happening, at least within my lifetime. So it's someone else's problem.
Thank you, Vishy. This was absolute delight. For those of you in the audience who are not aware, Vishy Anand has a minor planet named after him, so he's truly a superstar, both literally and figuratively.
Thank you so much, Murali, and thank you, Vishy, for these insights into the masterful way you not only confront a board, but as you say, confront your opponents every time you sit opposite them and figure out what their weaknesses are so that you can exploit them to the advantage of the game. So we've learned some of the things that Vishy does in order to improve his game and heighten his ability to draw upon his memory in a match. Good sleep, exercise, we've heard all that. Vishy, you mentioned taking a few breaths, but nowhere in your practice did you sort of talk about anything specific like meditation, for example. Is that something in your arsenal that you draw upon? From the Rubin Museum point of view, that's a very interesting exploration for us, and would like to hear from both of you about the role of meditation in memory improvement and enhancement.
I have done yoga during tournaments, before tournaments, and I find it very helpful. I find it harder though to use meditation as a tool. It's more, for me, it's primarily about stress relief and being able to come to terms with your situation, with your results, your decisions, and calming down. I don't think to give you an example, I've not found a way to train my memory to get better or train my concentration to get better. But I have found that things that interest me, I don't need to do it. Things that fascinate me, I concentrate effortlessly and I remember them tomorrow, even after I studied them today. What you forget is what bores you to some degree. Now, can you improve that? Well, the technique there is fairly straightforward. If there's some position which I'm generally uncomfortable with, I don't like, or some task that I don't like, then you break it up into very, very small bits where you can improve those very small bits. And that motivates you a little bit. You feel, I made some progress. Then it motivates you a bit, you go a bit further, and you can reduce it like that. To give you an example, I used to have problems with endgames, and it was a significant problem. It was costing me a lot of points in my tournaments. But once I started to study them, I understood how difficult they were, especially because I was not inclined to them in the first place. Then I took games of people who played endgames better than I did, and tried studying that. And I learned one or two techniques. Now, once I had those techniques to look out for, I found that the next time I was able to concentrate a bit more because there was something to concentrate on. I'm sure you can achieve that with meditation, but I was not able to convert it into a chess benefit. Let's put it that way. You can attain by meditation. In meditation, they tell you, and I've tried this, think of a dot or think of the Om sign, and then just focus on that for a while and block other things. Well, it is basically the same thing. It's giving you something to hook on. So I would suspect it's possible, but I do most of my exercise primarily to relax and get rid of the tension that builds inside you, because at the end of the day, you're a mass of emotions, and that's what you want to get away from.
Thank you. Murali, do you actually introduce meditation as a preventative for dementia-related diseases or disorders at all?
I wouldn't say that meditation is proven to prevent dementia, but there are an increasing number of studies involving brain imaging suggesting that it slows the rate of brain-related shrinkage in specific memory regions in the brain. And so if you extrapolate that, that could be protective. And also studies show it improves concentration, and concentration is the first step in memory archival and consolidation. So the better concentration you have, the more stronger the memories are. And so then they're more strongly consolidated in the brain and they're less likely to be eroded. So definitely it's a key component for anyone wanting to live a healthy brain lifestyle.
And is that true, do you think, of not only Alzheimer's, but also vascular dementia and other forms?
Absolutely. It's non-specific. It's also true just for healthy aging. Because the best studies have been done in healthy aging individuals, showing that after people who were experienced meditators at the age of 50 had a brain that was similar to like a 25 or a 30-year-old in terms of the structure of the brain. So clearly there are effects in all humans, not just in specific diseases.
When you brought up the chessboard for Vishy to remember, right? What we saw, for those who are not proficient chess players, we saw patterns. But Vishy saw narrative, a storyline, right? A connective that triggered an emotion that registered as a memory. So, so for him, there were two things going on, not only pattern and locus, but also narrative.
I have one nice story, which I'll just throw in quickly. So once when we were newly married, my wife told me, I put your stuff in the safe and the code is very easy for you to remember. It is 2706. And I told her, why is that rating easy to remember? Because rating is usually rounded off to 5 or 10. Nobody will have a ranking, a rating with 2706. She said, it's our anniversary. And so even with memory, I had my narrative and she had hers. So I just thought I'll throw that one in.
And so, but I do want to, as a sort of final focus, draw upon something that you, Vishy, mentioned as a distraction to your success, which was the surfacing of emotions and emotional states that might distract you from the focus of the game. Yet, conversely, you also say that you memorize by virtue of an emotional attachment to a sequence that was either exciting or interesting, made sense from a narrative, or surprised you. So can we talk scientifically about where emotions lie in helping us register what seems to be important and further our existence successfully, whether we use the chess game as a metaphor for life or not? Murali, can you advise us, and Vishy, could you aid and abet Murali's assessment, if you would?
Well, Vishy was absolutely right. The strongest memories we have are the ones associated with the strongest emotions. And usually the negative emotions make the strongest memories. And that's why PTSD, for example, people can't get rid of a memory from a Vietnam War 50 years later. And I think that's a remnant of our evolution when survival was so important. I think it's less important now because most of us are not going to be eaten by a bear.
Yes, I can. I'll just add that a position that makes sense to me is a kind of memory. So when you suddenly see the pattern, that's why it's good. That's a small memory. It helps me remember. I blundered and lost a game which I should have won when I was 7 years old. Is a different level of memory that I won't forget because I'll still feel my skin crawl, when I remember that position, and therefore the recollection is effortless. And I lost to that kid I really dislike is one level above that. So, every memory can be much more intense, and there are lessons I made a move in a hurry, lost that game, painful. I lost to a guy I didn't like, even more painful. And then, 20 years later, when I'm about to make a move quickly, I'll stop my hand. And, that level of reinforcement doesn't come easily. You really need the memory to be painful, as you said. Happy things as well. If something unexpected, really pleasurable is also equally good. But I would, if he has discovered that scientifically, the negative ones, I think I see no reason to argue.
But our thanks are due to many people putting together this program. I just want to say thank you, first of all, to my good colleagues, Olivia Cohen, Lynette Sauer, and Tarini Savara for working backstage to make this all happen for you all. And naturally, Rubin and presenting these programs online also depends very much on the sort of support and collegial encouragement of many of our funders, including Science Sandbox, an initiative of the Simons Foundation and the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council, and as well as individuals like Gerry Ohrstrom and Cheryl Henson. So thank you so much, all of you. And then finally, of course, to our incredibly helpful and insightful conversation partners, Dr. Murali Doraiswamy and Viswanathan Anand. Thank you so much for engaging together for the first time in public in this forum. We've learned so much, not only about chess, but also what fuels chess, which is the relationship of one mind to another in an extraordinary and honorable exchange of human beings in our civic society. So thank you so much for sharing your insights today. And we wish you all good health and continued good health in this very trying time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Such an honor and pleasure.
Thank you. Great being here.
Bye-bye, everyone.